Hello, this is James Bowden, and this is another one of my hot take videos. And just to say up front that these videos are often 50% prepared and 50% stream of consciousness. And so sometimes they last different lengths because of the fact that maybe I've already prepared this video and these reflections well enough to shorten the length of it. But sometimes while I'm doing it, I think of new things to say. I enjoy doing the media appearances. I really do. And it's always a great disappointment if I have to miss one due to either physical problems or just not being able to connect. But one of my big disappointments in doing them is that I often feel like I'm not able to get into my expertise, which is the Middle East and the military. And usually that is because a lot of media outlets want to try, especially the foreign media outlets, not so much here in the United States, though it can be about 50-50. But a lot of the foreign media is very obsessed with or very focused on understanding Donald Trump. And quite frankly, I'm sick and tired of Donald Trump. I hate Donald Trump in quite a lot of ways, to be very frank, very blunt and honest. Donald Trump is chaos. And his type of chaos, maybe I'm a little bit of chaos, but his brand of chaos is exhausting, frustrating. And I think what is also exhausting and frustrating is that I can understand where he is coming from and probably where he is going. And I wish I could marry that more explicitly with the media and let them know. And I try to do this with Russian Times, India, and I try to incorporate this into comments very early in the war, but I only had the briefest of moments to do so. Donald Trump has what I call a corporate foreign policy. And that's not that he emphasizes corporations in his foreign policy. What I mean is imagine, well, just everything for Donald Trump, and even he said it today in his press briefing, he thinks of himself, he sees himself primarily as a businessman, not as commander in chief, not as anything else, but just a businessman. And so, what Donald Trump does is he views the world through the lens of the boardroom. He is the CEO, and all of his cabinet members are the board. And countries are different independent businesses that he is trying to influence, he's trying to purchase them, he's trying to get them connected to his enterprise, which it's like the company is America. And so when he looks at different countries, he sees these as different corporate entities run by adversarial or potential allied CEOs. And so what this does, I mean, and you can hear it in everything that he says. I mean, definitely he speaks oftentimes in the language of a hostile takeover. We're going to remove him as president. We're going to put in our own people. We're going to take their assets. We're going to run their country. This is all corporate takeover language. And so if you want to understand Donald Trump, jettison, throw out international relations theory, realism, and any other kind of theory or construct of international relations. Throw out military strategy, tactics. because Donald Trump sees it as I've got a rival business that I have to take over, and I'm going, once I seize that country, once I seize that company, I'm going to remove its CEO because that's now my right. And I'm going to strip it of the assets that are very important for my business, and we're going to import them or add them into our entity, and we're just going to liquidate the rest. He reminds me very much of people who in Georgia back in the early 2000s, they purchased an entire chain of grocery stores, and they did exactly the same thing. They purchased the company, they replaced the CEO and the board, then they quite literally sold they sold some of the assets, and they imported some of those into their own portfolio, and then they liquidated the company. In fact, it was one of the very early examples of people who were mass fired. If I remember correctly, I do know that the chain closed its doors and employees found out that they didn't have a job because they would come to the store and find out the store wasn't open, and they would try to call somebody and they're like, oh, well, we're not in business anymore. It happened with Richard Thalheimer and the Sharper Image, ironically, a business that Trump was trying to do business with. They changed boards, they did a hostile takeover, they created a lot of junk products, the company tanked, and all they could do then, and which was really the intent, was sell off the remaining assets, and liquidate the rest. And I joined Sharper Image in 2005, and by mid to late 2006, it was closed. And I actually remember that very specifically because I was in Georgia on a vacation and saw the Trump steaks there being offered. And I'm like, all right, so this is uh, the decline and fall of Sharper Image. But again, I just really, everything that he does is through that language, through that medium. When Donald Trump is going up against Iran, you have to look at it as a corporate negotiation. If you look at it as a corporate strategy that he issues statements and he says, we're negotiating with people and we're trying to take over these things, he's talking in the language of business. He's not talking about a military takeover. He's not talking about strategic vision of multi-domain battle. He's not looking at intelligence. He's looking at them. And even, as a company, he says, we're going to take their assets. We're going to take their oil. We're going to take their power. We're going to threaten those things which undergird their business model, is basically the way he thinks. And he can't understand that Iran is not responding and they're being so truculent to what he sees as a very obvious choice. We're a bigger company. We've got more assets. We're going to come and crush you if you don't come and reach a good deal with us. And he gets incredibly impatient and he gets incredibly angry and he's trying to move these negotiations forward, and companies do typically do a lot of their kind of like a 50-50. As far as I know, they do negotiations both in the boardroom and through press release statements. Now, so this is my best understanding of Donald Trump. And it's about as far as my understanding goes, because at root, I really don't care about business. And I was very upfront with my ex spouse about the fact that I was not interested in business. And I got a little bit of guff on that a few years later. But, you know, for me, what wakes me up in the morning, what is if somebody whispers the news is on, I am awake. You've got my attention because I want to know as much as I can possibly know. And if something has happened overnight that I didn't know about it, I want to know about it as quickly as I possibly can. For Donald Trump, what wakes him up in the morning is definitely not like anything for other presidents. Maybe for John F. Kennedy, it was pushing forward a policy initiative. It was getting America to the moon. It was moving society forward. It was pushing US aid so that America would have soft power rather than relying all on hard power. So that woke him up in the morning. It was politics writ large, even for Lyndon Baines Johnson. And I know I'm going back to some old examples here, but even past presidents, for them, it was the motivating force. It wasn't the money, they weren't making money. But for Donald Trump, that is his alarm bell. I half imagine that what happens early in the morning is that somebody passes a dollar bill or maybe $100 bill in front of his nose and he wakes up and says, "Money." And I'm going to wake up and take over the world and all of the assets in it. If it weren't so scary, I think that it would be probably one of the most difficult to believe Bond villains because he's he is the ultimate corporate person to land the highest office in a country and to basically corporatize everything around him. Also explains his administration because he looks at that uh, at the cabinet meetings as the board. And in business, you sure as hell have to be loyal to your CEO. They have no patience and no time for people who are not fully committed. I worked for a company, I'll just say fast food restaurant for 3 years when I got my first job. It was Chick-fil-A. I had to move along because I developed an allergy to the food, and so I couldn't stay there. Um, I went and I started looking for a different kind of job right after that. And I was really shocked because, yeah, I mean, Chick fil A has a corporate philosophy, and there were certain things that you couldn't say or do at that job because it has a general Christian, family friendly atmosphere. But I went to the mall and I went into a place called Franklin Covey and filled out the application. Those were the days where you could spend the day at the mall filling out applications on paper, and you were likely to land a job, maybe if you were hard working and determined enough, maybe that same day. Um, so I went into the Franklin Covey store, filled out the application, and the guy sat me down and we had a discussion. I thought it went rather well. And he said, "All right, we'll come back in about 2, 3 days and we'll sit down again. We'll talk about it." I went back and he walked with me into the office. I almost felt like I was an employee already the way that he walked me into his office. And he was like, "I'm not going to give you the job." And I was shocked. I was really surprised because I thought that I had this, down pat. And he said, "I'm not going to give you the job because you don't believe in the product. You're just looking at it as a job. You're not." And he said, "We see our job here at Franklin Covey as not just having a job or not just sales. We're life coaches. We're going to give everybody a paper binded organizer." This was, so you can tell this is 1996, 1997. This is before the Crackberry. This is before your cell phones. So everybody had the status symbol of the notebook. And so he really believed that because I wasn't sold out and really invested in that product, that I was not going to be a good fit. And so I think that Donald Trump really, he has absolutely no framework of history. He has no uh, framework for literary works or any of that. So he doesn't see the political, social, military, consequences, or the dynamics or the consequences of demanding absolute sycophantic loyalty. And yet I think that the people around him, they certainly do appreciate and understand. They know exactly what kind of loyalty he wants. And it's rather distressing that nobody has taken the time or the decent opportunity to explain to him what are the pitfalls. I mean, we are honestly, and in my view, watching the first time that the Pentagon is waging a war with itself. Yes, I mean, military history is replete with generals who were changed out during the middle of wars. World War II, Vietnam, Korea, leadership changes. And sometimes it is not based on how well you're fighting, but on personalities. A lot of personality conflicts and a lot of personality driven leadership changes. So I don't want to dress this up as something unique. But I think that what makes it very unique and disturbing is that we've not seen this kind of loyalty oath, loyalty challenge in our government before, or as, at least as nakedly obvious as it is. Um, and that loyalty with Pete Hegseth to the president more than the Pentagon is disturbing because generally, yes, generally the uh, relationship, the Secretary of Defense, now the Secretary of War, generally he is a politician and he is a liaison between the White House and the Pentagon. That's his job. He needs to know the military. He needs to understand it. He needs to be able to interpret it and speak the languages back and forth. But now Pete Hegseth is, I think, in such a much stronger position and trying to micromanage the Pentagon to a much deeper degree than probably any other Secretary of Defense that we've had. And he is taking that same corporatized loyalty philosophy and importing it into the Pentagon and taking out generals and leadership based on the fact that, oh, you may not be loyal to the president. Uh, can't have that. So that is my understanding of Donald Trump. And that is about as far as I want to understand Donald Trump. The rest is just crazy. I really have to say that. Saying that here in this context is not something that I have said a great number of times, but I am really genuinely disturbed because the President of the United States is supposed to have good character, good conduct, good speech, good discipline, capable of reaching out to various different people and understanding the situations that he is in. And we have a president who is a rage machine. He is an anger machine. And something was, brought out to me yesterday in some conversations that I had with some people that I haven't talked with in a while. But this woman's mother is suffering from dementia and just simple old age. And she said, dementia is not where you're just crazy. What happens is things that are generally a part of your personality get taken up to 11. I knew a woman. Uh, so I went to church with my parents for many years. And we had a woman in our church who suffered genuine dementia, and she was really slipping and going. And it was very upsetting. And eventually she had to leave because she would be cursing, saying some of the most vile, awful curse words. during the service. And initially, the pastor was like, hey, he can't leave his wife and he really wants to come to church. And this is before remote churching. And so he allowed it for a little while, but eventually he had to draw a line because it was getting not just, because you used to do it quietly and you might catch an occasional word or two, but it became very loud. It was becoming distracting. And there were quite a number of people who, fairly or unfairly, but I think most people generally agreed that there was a feeling that this was her private personality on display, and that what she was doing in private was now becoming very public. Donald Trump has always had these kinds of difficulties. He's very discursive in his speaking, he's very ad hoc and always going on, being very boastful and getting close to using, if not actually using, very foul language. But now, uh, the post on his social media platform, I refuse to call it by its proper name because to me, truth is a very strong philosophical and actual concept. And what Donald Trump has been posting is not truth. It's an opinion, but it's not functional truth. And that's why I object to it so much. But beyond that, the out of control nature. I mean, just in the space of 24 hours, it went from glory be to God to praise Allah. And it was descending into and has been descending towards the expletive laden messages, which are entirely inappropriate. And we actually saw today that he used some bad language and was boasting about things of a military nature, of a violent nature, with 4 and 5 year old little kids, boys and girls. I mean, if Biden had done this, he would have been savaged by the right as, full of dementia and needing to be, dismissed through the 25th Amendment. He can't say that in front of little kids. That's inappropriate. You shouldn't be talking about these themes and during an Easter egg hunt. And they're right, you shouldn't. Because most presidents have a common sense and a sense of decorum. But even if, and it is possible that Trump's mind is going the way it is as a result of old age. And I'm sure that many of us know somebody who is 79 going on to 80 who is talking in this way, thinks in this way, and is as overqualified for a retirement home as Donald Trump is. So that is my hot take on Donald Trump. And let me just sum up some very core points here that I've wanted to make. And I'm going to draw a very bright line here. Stop looking for strategy, tactics, or anything military from Donald Trump. He doesn't know it. He doesn't want to know it. It's not even in his realm of existence or fundamental frame of mind. Donald Trump has a corporate mentality, and he sees everything, especially international relations, not through any kind of international relations framework, but through a corporate lens. One more time, as I said before, just want to nail this down. Donald Trump sees a cabinet as his board of directors, And he sees all these other countries in the world as corporations and as assets to be seized whenever they need an asset, they need to build up their corporation, he's going to go grab it. He'll appoint the leadership. He says this about Venezuela. He said this about Iran. Denmark, watch out. Because if you don't give him Greenland, he'll probably threaten to take over Denmark. And he'll be fine with that because he's going to be out of NATO. But again, Donald put everything through the lens of a corporate lens, especially in the mode of hostile takeovers. Thank you.